What's going on, Z Warriors? Mr. Waffles here, and today I'm going to be talking about luck and the kind of that term that's used a lot by card game players and how I feel it's very distorted. And I'm not going to lie, I'm a little angry right now, but just because stuff on retro players kind of using the word luck and how they kind of describe, like, oh, this game, luck based, blah blah, this and that. Again, I'm not saying that DBZ doesn't have luck, but compared to other card games, the luck is, I feel, is very minuscule, very small, and because a lot of it's based on decision making, and a lot of it is based on the fact that you're trying to create a situation for your opponent, so that way it kind of betters yourself to for victory. Um, and I don't think players really realize that this game really is about kind of making a situation where the cards in your hand are only good as the situation that you're kind of in. So I got into like a little argument with someone on retro. I'm not going to say who, but I'm going to be talking about you know the whole idea of luck, and I feel the whole um, aspect of how players kind of use that to justify their losses or whatever it might be. I'm gonna give you guys some different examples, and I want you guys to tell me in the comments down below. Is it luck? Is it skill? What is it? So, example number one. So, player A um, is playing Orange Yamcha, right? And player B, let's say, is playing like Namekian Piccolo or something like that. So, um, so the Namekian Piccolo player enters, and let's say the Orange Yamcha player um, draws a hand. And he has two Yamcha's rescues, another block, and let's say an attack or something like that. And the Namekian player um, passes, right? So the Yamcha player would like use his attack or whatever, and then the Namekian player passes again. Now, on one hand, the Yamcha player might say, "Well, it sucks. I drew a handful of blocks, right?" And but let's say if the Namekian player did attack, then the Namekian player might say, well, it must be nice you had all the blocks. Even though you can do the math and everything can kind of have all the statistical data, the point being is that on one hand, again, a lot of it is based on decision making, which players realize that that decision making really gives, I feel like, weight to the cards and kind of shift the whole game and how it's played. So if I have a handful of blocks and my opponent passes, those blocks are useless because if I pass, I discard, down to one. But if my opponent attacks, then the blocks are great. So the making player, if he attack and say, well, it must be nice, you had all the Yamcha's rescues, blah 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 blah. You got so lucky, you drew all your blocks. Or if the Namekian player passed, he can. The Yamcha player might say, "Well, I drew a handful of blocks. I couldn't do anything. That's why I lost," or something like that. So, really, what is it? What's the luck factor? Again, depending on the situation that's created. On one hand, a situation can be created by the Mexican player passing, which makes the Yamcha player's handful of blocks completely useless and dead, or you can attack and have those cards live. So that's why this game is super unique because of the passing and attacking kind of, or passing and action kind of ability in this game. This is one of very few games where attacking is not always the right answer. It's not always I have to attack to win. Like sometimes you have to really kind of bait your opponent and really think like, well, I know he might have this. I'm just gonna pass and see what he does and stuff like that. So that could make opponent's hand, might be really good in theory, not be so good. So if I have a handful of blocks and my opponent passes, what good are those blocks? You see what I'm saying? So is it now lucky because I drew a handful of blocks and he didn't attack me, which made my blocks dead? Or if my opponent did attack and I had a handful of blocks, now would the attacking player say, well, you had all the blocks, must be nice? Again, sometimes you have to do what you have to do. Sometimes you have to attack. There's no other option really in the game. But for the most part, this game creates a lot of situations, and you'll see that where just because you have a handful of blocks doesn't mean, it's good because your opponent can just not attack. That's the thing. Not attacking is probably good or sometimes better than attacking. Things of that nature, I feel like people can easily just say, oh, just because he didn't attack, so my hand of blocks was bad, I drew bad because he didn't attack me. But if he did attack you, would say your hand is good. So which one is it? That's what, I always feel that people in the DBZ community always um, uh, kind of gravitate towards like the whole luck thing, not realizing that your opponent probably put you in a spot where it made your hand bad because of their decision making, and put you in a situation where your hand full of blocks aren't good because they didn't attack. Another example is if your opponent, let's say you're playing Broly, and your opponent enters and for 3 straight combats, he uses Black Defensive Burst. Now, as you know, that card is a weakness for Broly because they can't perform physical attacks, right? So, let's say I'm the Broly player, and I say, must be nice, you got lucky, you drew all 3 defensive bursts and 60 cards, must be nice, go to Worlds, you're the best, right? But if I'm playing Orange Yamcha and my opponent draws those same 3 black defensive bursts, am I really gonna say, must be nice, you're the best, you got so lucky, you got all 3 defensive bursts? Most likely not. Why? Because the defensive bursts don't really hurt my deck because my deck's primarily an energy-based deck, That's another thing I see players tend to do a lot is use luck when things aren't convenient for them, like all the time. It's like, oh, must be nice you had this and that, well, that's your deck's weakness. If I'm playing Gohan and I have a bunch of allies, I can't be mad if my opponent sinister chokes me, because one, I probably did that to myself, and two, you have to take in those considerations of all these cards that can really hurt you, knowing the matchups, knowing, like, again, you can't really control, what you draw and things like that. And, you might say, oh, they drew this, but I just tend to play the game, and I just tend to just play the cards that are given to me. I just do the best that I can and kind of make the most of it. I'm, again, let's say playing Gohan, and I have a full field of allies, and my opponent Sinister chokes me. Am I really gonna sit there and be like, "Oh, must be nice, you had a Sinister choke and not win the game"? It's like, well, I created a situation for myself to allow myself to get Sinister choked and take 5 life cards of free damage. So whose fault is that? It's not my fault if my opponent draws the cards, because they're putting cards into their deck so they can draw them. That's the whole point of making a deck, so that way you can draw these cards. So I can't really be mad at my opponent for playing the cards and doing what they're supposed to do. Again, um, all that's also based on decision making. So before, I'm going back to the Broly example, before um, my opponent entered with the defensive burst, he had to enter. He had to make a decision and say, okay, I'm just going to enter and see what happens. Again, if I had a block, it can go very south for him. So things of that nature is, again, all these cards that your opponent has or you have, it's also all based on decision making and when you play them, timing and everything like that. It's not just a matter of, oh, they have it, because they have to, one, a player had to initiate combat, and two, they have to kind of time it right. So that's why I tend not to really complain about like luck, again, in quotes, luck in this game, because a lot of it's also based on decision making, trying to put your opponent in a certain corner. Going back to my Broly Yamcha example, again, if anyone out there is going to complain that your opponent drew black defensive burst and you're playing orange Yamcha, then you probably shouldn't be playing orange Yamcha, because you're playing mainly energy attacks. And no one's really going to complain if, you got black defensive burst. But if you got black energy web, you'll probably say, oh yeah, they got lucky that you drew all 3 energy webs. But if you're playing Broly and they use energy web against you, obviously you're probably not going to care at all. So even though the math is still the same and it all equates to, whatever the probability is and statistics, obviously on one hand you would feel like your opponent had the luck because they drew a certain weakness. They drew your weakness pretty much. But in the other example, they didn't. It wasn't your weakness, so you don't care. Even though the numbers still add up in terms of the percentages and all that stuff. So I see that a lot in DBZ players where they just say luck, and it's just because they had a certain weakness in their deck, and unfortunately for them, they got like the bitter end of it. But you know, sometimes that's how it is. It's not so much luck, but it's just to know that certain matchups have certain cards are better in certain matchups, so it gives like the appearance of luck if your opponent draws like your weakness. For example, if I'm playing Broly and you're playing, let's say, like some blue deck, and you play Blue Betrayal, obviously it's not going to probably affect the Broly player that much because Usually they don't really have allies. So far I've seen all the Broly builds don't run allies. Very few setups, if any, and probably no drills. So the blue betrayal in the Broly matchup, and you can, let's say you see all three copies, it's probably not going to do anything. Now, is a Broly player going to say, "Wow, man, must be nice. You drew all your blue betrayals. You know, you got so lucky." But let's say if you were going against a deck that had a lot of board presence and you hit all three blue trails, then it's more likely for the person who's playing the setup kind of decks will say, "Wow, it must be nice. You got all three blue betrayals." You know. So again, the blue betrayals is constant in both matchups, but one is more effective than the other. So it kind of looks like it has more of a luck aspect because of um, it's how it's stronger in a certain matchup than another matchup. You can't equate luck to when you feel like it. You can't say it's lucky when this card hurts me, but it's not lucky when, you know, it doesn't work in another deck. You know, you just play the cards that you're given to, and that's why I'm always kind of gonna reiterate and really say that you just play what's kind of given to you. Um, Again, timing is also everything. You know, you have a block and your opponent throws an attack, and you might think he might have another attack. You know, you might have to eat the first one and then probably block the second one. Now, am I going to say, well, must be nice you have the block for this attack? It's like, no, well, I had it, but I just decided to use it for this particular attack because I felt like you might have something stronger. A lot of times, you know, you see this a lot with orange players where they might use Yamcha's attack and you have an energy block and you, instead of you using it, you might think, okay, they have four cards in hand, so they might use another bigger energy attack later on. So you save the energy block, and then they use like orange PowerPoint or something like that, and you block it. So it's like things like that. Again, you're trying to create a situation where, you know, you're not putting yourself in a bad position, but at the same time, you know, you're being aware of things that are going on. Another example is also knowing the decks, you know, and things of that nature. Of, you know, if you're playing a deck and you haven't seen Times of Warriors tool all game, you know, you can expect at some point in the game that it might appear. So if you enter combat and you attack any time, you shouldn't be surprised. You know, you should kind of expect it and know and take that in consideration. So maybe you hold a sphere instead. You know, expecting, hey, it's been like halfway through the game, I still haven't seen time. You know, he probably has it in his hand, so you know, might keep a sphere or something like that, or stare down confront or something. Little things like that really kind of add up, and you're trying to create a better situation for yourself and a worse situation for your opponent. You know, knowing that, you know, the cards that are given to you, you put them in your deck so that way you can play them, so that way you can see them. Sometimes you don't see the cards at all that you might need to see, and then that's how it is. Just like, you know, it's just a random. Everything's random when you shuffle and everything changes. But, you know, am I going to say, okay, I run three of this card, I haven't seen it once. You know, I I got lucked out. No, you know, I have to try and create alternate solution for that. You know, I don't make excuses for not seeing a certain card because I know, okay, if my deck can't really function without seeing this one card, then I probably have to retweak it and go back to the drawing board and see what I can do to kind of make up for that. You know, this game has, I feel, a lot of skill, more skill that definitely outweighs the luck. I've seen a lot of same people top in events. You know, it's not um, you know, not random chance or it's not luck that they're winning big events and not luck that Tim Battao won Worlds and then won with Blue Gohan. You know, he's a skilled player. So, you know, you have to. And another thing I feel like luck does is like demerit the player. And even if this is not the intention of the person who kind of prized luck, that's what I'm going to call it. It does have that effect on them because say, oh, you know, lucky you drew this, and that. You know, it kind of devalues the player in terms of how they perform, and you just kind of blame it on luck. For example, Tony Ortiz, probably the best Raditz player in the game, top almost all the time with Raditz, you know, with an MP that's not very powerful, an MP that you probably don't see anyone else topping with at all. You know, so someone might say, oh, you got lucky because he drew this and this and this, but he's just playing the cards that he's given just like any other player, and he's trying to again create situations to put your opponent into a bad spot, just like any other player would. You know, you're just playing the cards that are given to you and doing the best that you can. Again, just because you have an attack doesn't mean you always play the attack, and just because you have a block doesn't mean you always play the block. So knowing when to sequence stuff is very important in this game too. You know, timing and everything. Um, also thinking about the odds, thinking, okay, if I take this attack, if I hit endurance, I can save my stages and unleash just another attack. It's just like a lot of things that kind of go on throughout the game, where I feel the luck isn't really that relevant. I don't know any instance where I can really say like, oh, they got lucky, because you might say, oh, all he had to do was short his time and he won. Well, if you didn't see all game, you got to expect the time to pop up eventually, right? So it doesn't matter if, the card is limit one per deck. If you haven't seen it once, expect to see it. Just prepare yourself for the worst. And again, you can't always prepare yourself for everything, but if your deck has a certain weakness, then any card I feel, um, or any deck that has those cards in it would, in a drawer, can really exploit that, and it would seem that there is more luck in the game than anything else. So, for example, if I'm running Blue Gohan and I'm playing against Satan Broly, I know that Broly has or Satan in general, I know that the Satan style has a lot of anti-ally hate. So I'm expecting, spin kicks, I'm expecting surprises, I'm expecting tantrums, I'm expecting like my whole board to be wiped out. And if my opponent draws them, I can't say that they got lucky because my deck is weak to certain cards. And that same card in a different matchup wouldn't be as effective. So is it luck that, they drew it against me and because it hurts my deck? But in a certain matchup it's not lucky because it doesn't hurt their deck. Like, what is it? What is it, people? I really want to know. Like, I really want to know, like, where the line is drawn, where it's luck. Is it luck because it hurts me and doesn't hurt a different deck? Like, where does it come down to? And those are the things that I kind of see reoccurring over and over again. uh, and again, I mentioned about situations. If I have like 50 cards in my life deck and my opponent draws ball 7, and he has like 4 cards in his life deck, am I going to be like, oh, it's lucky, you must be nice? Like, obviously the situation is I have a huge lead and that ball 7 doesn't impact me as much. And again, certain things do happen where your opponent can ball out like in several turns, and that stuff happens, but it's not like it happens all the time where um, every match you hear, oh, it's playing a bowl deck, he bowled out in like 2 turns or something like that. Again, that's like it happens sometimes, and it is what it is. But it's not like something where every deck is running balls, so that happens constantly. And another thing is that I keep mentioning situations. MPs, masteries, all these things create before the game starts a situation. So, for example, if I'm playing Ruthless Roshi and I open up Shattering Leap, Restriction. Now you might say, it's a pretty good hand, but it's Roshi, so it's probably not going to be doing that much, so I can definitely take some hits, because the situation is that the damage output is not that high. So you might not think, oh, he didn't really get that lucky because, like, sure, I took some damage, but it's whatever. But now if I'm playing Turles and I open up Shattering Leap, Restriction, that's a different story, right? Because you can't use endurance and you're taking a buttload of damage, right? So now would you say it's lucky because it's Turles, but not lucky because it's Roshi? Again, the situation's better that situation's worse for you that you're playing against Turles and they open up Shattering Leap, Restriction. But obviously, you wouldn't say it's lucky, or you're less likely to say it's lucky if it's Roshi or some other MP where you can still use endurance and you don't get the buff off of personality, and they open up the same exact thing. So there's a lot of things in this game that again create situations, and the situation I feel is what players think that the luck is. If it's Ruthless Turles and they open up Shattering Leap Restriction, you might say they got God draws, they're lucky. But if it was another MP outside of like Broly or some kind of aggressive like Garlic or something like that, and they open up Shattering Leap Restriction, you wouldn't say, oh, they got lucky. You say, okay, I can take this, I can eat it because they're very weak. It's not going to do that much. Blah 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 blah. Right? So certain MPs already created a situation for itself, and it already kind of puts you in like a certain like a bad situation. Like, for example, like Ruthless Broly, Ruthless Turles can really do a high damage output, sorry, very quickly, and it doesn't require that much setup. But certain other MPs might have a harder time doing that. So the situation that you're in when you're playing against Broly and Turles is obviously a lot different than when you're playing against something else. So the cards that they draw have much more value, or it might seem more lucky if they draw like really good stuff because of the type of MPs that they are. So again, MPs and masteries do affect the situation and can have can give a player a different outlook on what they consider luck just because of how the MPs are, but not so much the cards. You just play again the cards that are given to you. I'm gonna cool down. It's not a big thing, but I just want to make that aware that you just play the cards that are given to you, and if your deck already has a weakness, then the cards that your deck is weak against, you might say that your opponent got lucky because they drew them because they hurt you more. And I give several examples. I'm playing allies, and I'm going against red, and they knee lift and blow up all my allies. I might say you got lucky because you drew the a card that hurts my deck, but obviously that card might not have that much value against certain other decks. So, you can't say it's luck just because it hurts you, and all of a sudden like it doesn't hurt you, so it's fine. I don't know where the line is kind of drawn. So hope you guys can help me out on that. Is this game luck based? Again, I'm not dismissing that it doesn't have luck, like, because all card games do to some degree, but I feel like a lot of it's based on decision making. It's based on putting yourself and trying to put your opponent in situations so that way the card value either diminishes or is higher in certain regards based on the situation. So again, I hope you guys liked the video. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And again, keep on playing, guys. I love the game a lot. It's a lot of fun because it's so much decision making. Because every card that you have in your hand has so much value, and it's not so much. It's all about how you use the card. How you use the cards that are in your hand. Again, just because you have an attack doesn't mean you attack all the time, and just because you have a block doesn't mean you have to block the first card that you see. It's all about playing the odds and kind of looking for the right opportunity to use certain cards. So until next time, Z Warriors, hope you enjoyed this video. Mr. Waffles out.